Small talk is a way for two people who don't know each other to have a conversation. So it's not a deep conversation, but it can lead into a deeper and more meaningful conversation once you have established some type of small talk discussion. So this lesson is going to give you phrases that you can use to engage in small talk with English speakers so that you can get more practice, and also so that you can overcome your fear of speaking. Now, when you meet somebody new, people often ask similar questions again and again. And a lot of this does depend on the situation that you are in. But once they know you and once they want to know what you do, where you're from, etc., then you'll find yourself answering the same questions again and again. So it makes sense to practice this area of English so that you can answer these questions in an effortless way. Now, this lesson is going to be split up into two parts. Firstly, we're going to look at different situations where small talk is often used. And then we are actually going to look at different topics that you can use when engaging in small talk. And what I also recommend that you do is check out the description, because there'll be a list of phrases that we have used in this lesson. Before we get started, I do want to introduce a really cool phrase here, because before engaging in small talk, you might have to break the ice. To break the ice. Now, a lot of you might know what this means. If you don't, it's when nobody is speaking in a certain situation, and then that first person says something. This is breaking the ice. So I imagine you can think of a situation where you're in a group of people and nobody is talking. And then suddenly somebody says something, and then a discussion gets going. So it's a good idea to break the ice before engaging in small talk. And a very simple way to do this is to simply say, "Hi, I'm Jack," or "Hi, I'm Claire," in whatever name that you have. Okay, let's start with a situation in which small talk is often used. And this is a fun one because you're now at a wedding. Okay, so you're at John and Sarah's wedding and you're sitting around a table and you don't know anybody there. Usually it's quite quiet. Nobody says anything until someone says, "Hi, I'm Jack." And you have broken the ice, and now it's time to engage in small talk. I think the number one question to ask here is, how do you know John and Sarah? How do you know John and Sarah? This is common ground, or what is known as common ground, where you have something in common. You both know the bride and groom, but you don't know how you know the bride and groom. So you can ask, how do you know John and Sarah? If somebody asks you this, you can say, "Oh, I know them from school. I know them from work. I grew up with John. I've met Sarah recently." So that's a very common question to ask at a wedding. And it's good to think about what kind of answer you're going to give if you are in this situation. Another question that people ask in this situation is, where have you traveled from? Where have you traveled from? Because when people go to a wedding, they usually travel from across the country and sometimes from different countries. So you can just ask, where have you traveled from? And then again, this might lead into a more meaningful conversation. If the person has traveled from a different city or country, or if it's a destination wedding, you can ask them, have you been here before? Have you been to Sydney before? Have you been to Asheville before? And then again, this leads into a conversation about travel, about different topics. For the second situation, let's imagine that you work for a company with 1,000 employees, all from different branches. And then your company puts on an event. Let's say it's in a Christmas party just before Christmas. And you turn up to this event and you don't know a lot of people. So again, you break the ice and say, "Hi, I'm Jack." And then you can say, "Which branch do you work at? Which branch do you work at?" Again, it's a very simple question that leads into a different type of discussion. Or you can say, what do you do at this company? What do you do at this company? To establish some common ground, you might ask if this person knows somebody who you also know, so that you can talk about this person and then understand that you both share something in common. And then from there, you can just describe the situation in which you are in. Like you can say, oh, this has been such a good event. Are you having fun too? Or this food is amazing. I'm surprised it's so good. This is small talk that leads into different types of conversations. The next example is if you are at a party. So imagine you have been invited to a house party where you are celebrating a birthday, and you turn up to the party, and again, you don't really know anybody. And I have to say at this point, this can sometimes be really awkward, where you don't know anybody at a party, and if other people seem to know other people, it might be difficult for you to fit in. But this is where small talk can help you. So you can say things like, oh, this chili is delicious, or these burgers are amazing. So you can talk about the food and give your opinion on the food. Or you can ask again, how do you know John and Sarah? Or how do you know Paul, whose birthday party it is? How do you know Paul? This just leads into different topics. And then another thing that people do, and I think this is specific to women from my experience, is to compliment somebody on their dress, on their purse, on their shoes, etc. But something that you can compliment anyone on is the house. Oh, your house is great. I love this house. You have a beautiful backyard. Just to give compliments to make people a little bit more at ease. So those are some situations where small talk is often used. But it's also good to know the type of topics that people use when engaging in small talk, no matter the situation. And the number one thing to talk about is weather. Okay, the weather. And saying things like, oh, it's so hot outside today. So you're at a party, you don't know anyone, you come in, it's so hot out there. It feels great in here. Or once you start talking a little bit more about the weather, it's going to cool down soon. It's going to get really hot next week. Now, I made a video on different phrases that you can use to talk about temperature. So go check that out because it's going to be very useful for any type of situation. Another topic that people like to discuss is the news. Now, be a little bit careful here because there are certain news stories that are very divisive, where people feel very emotional about and they have strong opinions about. Usually that comes on a little bit later than small talk, but there are certain news stories that are fun to talk about. For example, I remember engaging in small talk and saying, did you hear about the bear that got into a woman's car in North Asheville? So there was this story of where a bear opened the car door and got into the car, and somebody took a picture of it. So it's a fun story to talk about that actually leads into a further discussion about bears, how prevalent they are right now, and just how amazing it is to live among bears in your neighborhood. So certain news stories are worth talking about and aren't as divisive as others. You can just say simply like, what building are they constructing across the road? Or have you been to that new restaurant in town? All these little local news stories can help you engage in small talk. Another common topic is sports. So it might depend on the person if you can actually talk about sports. But just to give you an example, when people know I'm from the UK, they'll often ask me about football or soccer and ask me which team I support. So they know people from the UK love football. Luckily, I love football, so I can always answer in a positive way. So they ask questions about that. So just for example, which team do you follow? Which team do you support? If I say I live near Manchester, people often ask me, oh, do you follow Manchester City or Manchester United? And that's when I tell them, no, I support Preston North End, and they don't know who Preston North End are. But again, this is a way to talk about different types of things. And sports can be a little bit tricky, like I said, because you don't know if that person is a sports fan or not. But if they are wearing a sports cap, if they just seem to be a sports person, then you can ask them about teams they support, what kind of sports they like, if they watch the Super Bowl. So a simple question is, did you watch the Super Bowl last night? Did you watch the Super Bowl last week? And then if you're a sports fan, you can actually get into a great discussion about sports once you've engaged in that initial small talk. So in summary, there are various phrases that you can use to engage in small talk with somebody. And again, the key is just so that it's just a great way to start a conversation with somebody. It's like a rule to follow, or like certain rules to follow, where you don't just go up to somebody you don't know and ask them if they believe in God and get into a deep discussion straight away. Instead, you want to ask certain questions and see if you can find some common ground with this person. So it could be sports, it just could be certain news stories. You don't know where it might lead. You might ask them a question about the weather and then talk about how you both lived in Spain and it was so hot while you both lived there. And then you have something in common, and this again leads to a great discussion. So use small talk as a tool, but remember, you'll need to break the ice first as well. Now, if you want to internalize these types of phrases to learn more questions for small talk, then join the To Fluency program. I have a lot of phrases that you can download and memory cards that you can use so that you can internalize these phrases, and so that you can learn grammar at the same time and build your fluency, so that when you are talking with people, these types of questions and answers will just come out effortlessly. So definitely check out the To Fluency program if you want to learn more about that. Thank you for watching this lesson. Please like and share it. And while you're here, take a look at another one of my lessons. Okay, bye for now.